We're going to continue our how to apply the KSL NTS Shot Cycle to your style of shooting. We're still in the beginning stages of learning this style of form, but now is where we really start to learn some specifics as to positioning and body awareness and things like that, and that's what we'll cover in this video. So we're going to continue along with our KSL NTS application type series here. Up until this point, we've really only learned some very basic principles. We have gotten to the point of where we now have learned what set position is, what setup, loading, anchor, transfer, expansion, and follow through are. Obviously releases in there as I've discussed in a previous video. If you're new here and you haven't caught up yet, I will have links in the description below and a card at the top up there for the playlist. I would start there and learn from zero if you're interested in learning more about the KSL Shot Cycle or the NTS system. And if you're really looking for a deep dive into it, I can recommend this manual here. It is Total Archery, written by my coach, Lee, as well as an old teammate of mine, Tyler Benner. And it's a really, really good resource with lots of information, lots of pictures, lots of diagrams and details on the method itself. So if you're interested in that, check it out. I'll have links in the description below to my website, Kaminski.com. Plus, I'll put a card at the top up there for my website as well. Plus, I'll have Amazon links in the description below if you're interested in that instead of my website. So like I said, we've gotten to know the very basics of the steps. But I think before we go too much further, you really need to understand how important basic tools are when learning this method. Even if you are normally shooting well into the 40 pounds of draw weight and you've shot lots of arrows for lots of years, learning new technique is challenging. So even if you are experienced, and especially if you are a novice, a very light bow to practice with is vitally important. So not just necessarily your bow with lighter limbs, I'm talking like this bow right here is a perfect tool, the basic Samick Sage, 18-pound limbs. They do make training limbs as well, or at least they were making them. They're on clearance at Lancaster, or at least they were. I don't know if they're sold out. But essentially you want something that's very light. You can manipulate, you can basically do what you want with, but you want to get to the point of where you can get into position and hold it for quite a while without really seeing any sort of fatigue. Because the point is, you need to get comfortable with the positions, the anchors, the body angles, things like that, to understand better how it feels. Another great thing is a stretch band. I've already recommended that, but you gotta have one. And a mirror to see yourself. I have a camera here. I can look at myself here on the viewfinder, or I don't know what that's called. Technically a screen, I guess. I don't know. And I could see myself if I wanted to. I could watch it and see, do I get into the positions I need to in order to be successful. And then I can make a determination on what I see and make adjustments to get the feel down with the position down. So that's where a mirror is critical. Watching eyes is very helpful. A coach, a spouse, a teammate, you name it. Somebody to kind of not just keep you accountable, but to like give you feedback on, hey, your elbow's a little high, your shoulder's high, you need to relax more, whatever. So with all that being said, let's do a little bit more in-depth and a little bit more application into the series itself. So there are some very basic things that we've already covered as far as positionings, T-form, roughly upright posture, things like that. And we've learned the very, very basic names of the steps and the positions. I'm going to give you a couple of things that you should really try to focus on in those positions to help make you understand what they feel like a little bit better. So the whole idea of this method is essentially to get you to be repeatable, to get you to be comfortable, and to also get you to be able to shoot good scores under pressure. Those three things are important. Another added benefit is injury prevention. If done correctly, it should prevent injuries, just like any method should when done correctly. That is an important caveat. You have to do it the right way. Otherwise, it can lead to injuries and problems. There are specifically, very different ways of drawing back a bow, not just in Olympic style recurve or bare bow, but also traditional Asiatic styles and so on. Some of them do some pretty radical movements to get the bow back, especially when shooting very, very heavy draw weights for whatever purpose. So unless you're doing a specific draw properly, you can really hurt your shoulder. And I'm sure I'm doing it wrong. I don't really, it doesn't matter to me. I'm just not interested in some crazy styles to shoot extremely heavy bow weights. But there are ways to manipulate the body when done correctly without injury. That's the whole point. You got to be able to do this long term without hurting yourself. You really want to make sure you're doing things correctly. That's where starting with a light bow or a stretch band to get you into the positions that you want to be in to prevent hurting yourself. One of the main things that I want you to learn first is after set position, how do you go from set position to set up position, and where is that? Set up, I said, is somewhere around here, give or take. Set up, you'll notice, is not at brace height here, okay? Part of the reason of shooting this method to not just prevent injury, but to shoot high scores under pressure specifically, when the moment counts at a tournament or when you are trying to shoot a personal best in your backyard, things like that, is to basically be able to repeat it and to do it well under pressure. And using larger muscles, bigger muscles to do the work, and potentially and ideally even using bone structure to do the work is the whole goal. So the idea would be if I had two forces exerting towards each other or in one way, shape, or form, if I have the structure of my fingers aligned in a straight manner and I exert forces forward, inwards to each other, I can use relatively small muscles with relatively low amounts of effort to maintain the structure. It's just stabilizers, basically. But if I were to offset the forces at an angle and I were to push on them, now I'm using muscles in the fingers to hold and resist that tension as opposed to the structure of the bones. So when you do that under pressure, you can shoot better more often because you have less of the stress hormones being dumped into your system. It goes down a deep rabbit hole, as you can see, but essentially what you want to do is to get into alignment. That means to get into a straight line from this shoulder to this shoulder to this wrist, and to use large muscles to get into that alignment. I have a video that I've already created about how to get into alignment with an overhead camera. I'll have links in the description below and a card at the top up there for you to look more into how to get into alignment. I'll talk about that a little bit more here. But the first step of getting into alignment is to go from set position up to setup, and to do that correctly. Many people will follow set position up at brace height here. That's the distance from the grip to the string at rest. And if they do, they go from set to set up. And you can see in this position, I have a big triangle. It's not a straight line from set to set up. If I follow brace height, you'll see how I'm not in great alignment. But if I go from set to set up and I make my body go into great alignment and not listen to the bow's brace height, you'll see now that rear shoulder, this front shoulder, and my wrist are almost in a relatively straight line. Sorry I don't have an overhead camera set up yet. I really need to just get a dedicated one up there. I have a lot of things going on at the moment and haven't been able to dedicate that time yet, but it will come. So the whole point is to not necessarily listen to your equipment. You shoot the bow shoots the arrow. You must do the same thing over and over and over again on your bow, and then the bow will shoot the arrow the same every single time. So your job is to get into the correct position so you can do that. So that's going from set to set up. And what I am doing is trying to put this shoulder, and this wrist in a straight line by rotating my chest, rotating and increasing my draw length from set to set up. You'll notice that the wrist, this wrist, ends up somewhere around my chin when viewed from this direction, straight from my side, parallel to the shooting line. So if you look here, you'll see in my setup position, my wrist is right around my chin, give or take. If you want to get more specific, this angle from here to here to here is at about a 90 degrees, give or take. So you go from here to setup, I'm not aiming yet, and then as I go to draw, I'm leading with my shoulder. I pull using the shoulder muscles, I pull using the back muscles, I lead with the shoulder, and the hand draws back. So as I go from set to setup, and then I go to load, I draw with my shoulder until my string hits my chin, and then I come up into anchor. I use the shoulder to draw, I don't use the hand to draw. If I use the hand to draw, many people will use their bicep, their arm to pull back, which is a smaller muscle compared to your back muscle. If I use my back muscle, it's a lot more powerful and I can do a lot more work with less effort. Plus, it further enhances getting into alignment. I also have a video on how to use a shoulder to draw the bow back. I will have links in the description below for that as well. I have lots and lots of content created if you haven't noticed yet, so make sure you are subscribed because I am uploading lots and lots of content these days, at least 2 videos a week. So in addition to set to set up and leading with the shoulder as you draw, the whole idea is to try to just be repeatable, to be consistent. And ultimately, a tool like a light bow and a tool like a stretch band will allow you to go in front of a mirror and to see yourself getting into positions. To do this method correctly and ideally, and actually to do any method correctly and ideally, you must put in the effort and the work to actually try to do it. That is something that a lot of people miss. And it's not necessarily something that's included in the book and included in methods that are discussed about, but you must exert some sort of effort, sweat equity, something in order to be proficient at it. So you have to try. And standing in front of a mirror and looking at yourself, I can look at myself in the mirror, my camera here, from this position with my eyes, and I can see, oh, my elbow's pretty level. But if my elbow was a little high, I could see, oh God, it's way too high. I'll move it down. Okay, now I feel like this, like I've covered in previous videos, but my elbow's actually level. So now I know, okay, my feeling's gotta be this in order to make my elbow level. So that's the importance of coaching yourself. You have to try to do it specifically. You have to put in that sweat equity that I'm talking about. And you can watch yourself, you can draw back, go from set to setup, check your alignment, angle down. Okay, yeah, it looks pretty good. Now I'm going to lead with my shoulder. Oh, it looks pretty good. Anchor and turn. Oh, my elbow's nice and low. I made sure that I felt like this again to make sure it was nice and level. This isn't really very substantive. There's not a whole lot of substance here yet because it's not super important. The whole idea is I need you to understand that nothing, no form changes anywhere in any way, shape, or form come naturally. You have to force it, you have to learn it. Either you're doing it for the first time and you're genuinely learning a new task, or you're erasing bad or older habits and positions that you need to basically do more work than what you did to have those old habits in order to have the new habits. So coaching yourself and being deliberate and doing things on purpose is the only way to move forward. The next challenging thing to really go over before much in the way of form changes happens is to learn how to control your posture. Many people will struggle with lifting their arm independent of their shoulder. This is a very simple thing, and it's not something, again, you'll read in the book, but I think that it is very important to learn for the purpose of keeping the posture the way it's supposed to be. You won't be able to get into the positions in the correct way moving forward at this point. So the whole idea, like I said, lifting your hand or your arm without moving your shoulder is an interesting thing. Not a lot of people can just lift their arm without lifting their shoulder first. Many people will lead with the shoulder before they lift the arm. That does have to do with lifting the bow here in the actual, position of the bow position, but it also has to do with overall posture position. Ideal posture, if I were to aim at the camera or you pointing at yourself in the mirror, would look something similar to this. As you can see from my scapulas, my back here, down to my waistline, give or take, is a relatively straight line and it's flat. What it is not is curved and arched like this. You'll see how much higher and upright I am standing. Then from this angle, improper, proper. You'll see a big difference in this section here, front and back. Improper would be an arched back with a letter like a C, a curve. Better would be flatter, like this. And in order to achieve that, you do two basic things. One is you tuck your hips under as if you're about to go sit down, as if you're holding a quarter between your butt cheeks or a dollar or whatever you want. It's essentially going from this position to this position where you tuck the hips underneath, you activate the glutes, and then you activate the legs and the quads and everything to hold that position. You have to keep the hips tucked the whole time. Even when you go to lift the bow, the hips stay tucked. They don't untuck as you're lifting the bow. They stay tucked under just like this as you go to lift the bow. They don't become untucked as you lift because you want to keep this part of your back nice and flat, and you do that with the hip tuck. The second thing that you do is you drop the chest down. The best way to do it, for me, to explain it to you, and you can do this at home right now, is you can breathe into your chest and then just breathe it all out and relax. That's it. Just breathe out and relax and keep this position instead of breathing into the chest. You breathe out, keep it there, and now do some abdominal breathing or use your diaphragm to breathe instead of your intercostals, the rib muscles, to open and close the chest. To breathe this way, you want to breathe in the abdomen and the diaphragm. So when I tuck my hips and I drop my chest, I keep this position as I go to lift the bow, and that is akin to lifting my arms without lifting my shoulders. Because many people, they'll go from here, hips tucked, chest dropped, and as they go to lift, they will lift with their rib cage up, and then they get into this arched position where they have lost the tuck, and they have also lost the slouch, whatever you want to call it. So when you go from set position with hips tucked, chest dropped, to set position, and then drawing, you'll see how my back stays nice and flat. But if I go from set position, hips tucked, chest dropped, and I lift with my chest, chances are I'm going to also lose my hip tuck as well, and now I have that back arch. Very important in order to have chest clearance here. Even for men, especially for women, the ideal position is to not have the string touching your chest. You'll see that there's space between the string and my chest, and the only way to get that is to either have horrendously bad alignment or to be proper alignment to have that chest dropped and the hips tucked. That's the only way to get it. Cramping up, trying to show you the wrong way to do things here, even with a light bow. So the whole idea is to give yourself chest clearance in order to be able to get into proper alignment without touching your chest. If I have my back arched up, I can't get really into very good alignment without that string, as you can see now, touching my chest. That causes a lot of disturbance and a lot of issues, and ultimately it can cause some pain depending on who you are, so be careful there. So learning how to keep the hips tucked under, the chest dropped, in this position when shooting archery, even if you don't have the best form, keeping that chest down and those hips tucked, even without proper alignment, is still better than nothing. And that's really important to get started on the right foot, to learn some basic body control, very basic body control on how to lift the bow without lifting your shoulders, lifting your chest, and losing those things, as well as you dictating the form to the bow, not the bow dictating form to you as you follow it to brace height when you go to lift the bow up. Those two things alone are going to be really huge and really important in your journey moving forward through this method, because body control is important, self-coaching is important, and overall just being aware that you shoot the bow and the bow shoots the arrow instead of you shooting the arrow. Those are really important things to know moving forward.